Hello, welcome back. I'm Lori Williams. I am a psychic medium, energy healer, animal communicator, and spiritual teacher. And today I want to talk to you about emotional maturity. How I like to explain how we become programmed through our emotions is I want you to look at your subconscious mind as a river. So when things happen in the consciousness, being like consciously aware, they're happening in the here and now. When the subconscious is stuff that's happened that's now in the past. It's kind of like our subconscious is basically like a big file system of everything that we've either gone through or a perception of how we've gone through it, or the perception of the people in our lives, our experiences, how we view the world. All of that is part of our subconsciousness. So when you're first born, you have your subconscious is like it's just a straight river. That's how I like to explain it. Then you have something that happens, say a trauma for an example, that happens in your consciousness. It then becomes ingrained in your subconsciousness because that's what it does. Our consciousness puts things into our subconsciousness, and then the subconsciousness becomes our programming. So, for an example, let's say if you are 6 years old, you go through a trauma. That trauma that's happening in your consciousness now becomes programmed in your subconsciousness, and it's like a rock has been put on the side of your river. Not necessarily right in the river, but on the side of it. Enough that the river is now has to work to go around that rock. And then the next trauma, say you're 10 years old, another trauma happens. Another rock is set in your subconscious level, in your subconscious mind. And eventually, over the course of your life, with all the traumas, all of the things that you perceive as bad or a negative experience in some way, shape, or form, are those proverbial rocks they're being sent. So instead of having a consciousness or subconscious mind that is like a straight river flowing, it's like jaded. It's going in and out and weaving around the rocks, and it may have to go way over to the left side to come back to the right. Like it's probably a huge mess. So in healing, what you're essentially doing is you're taking one of those rocks out and allowing that river to flow in more of a straight kind of a straight flow. It doesn't have to work so hard. Because what happens is our subconscious mind becomes our programming. So let's say that trauma that happened to you at 10 years old. You perceived everything to be a certain way. It's now programmed. And your body, your mind, and well, your mind and your body wants to make sure that whatever happens to you that is perceived to be bad, whatever happened to you, they want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So if you have something that comes up in your life that even remotely triggers your um it might be a cloudy day, like remotely. If the trauma happened and you looked outside and you seen a thunderstorm going on outside while this trauma was happening to you, every time that you see a thunderstorm, it could trigger that part of you. It's like basically reawakening. It's like your consciousness now becomes aware of that subconscious programming, and we act and react based on what that subconscious programming is. So what when I talk about emotional maturity, or actually I'm going to be talking more about emotional immaturity today, what is happening is that, and I mean this is written, you can do your own investigating on this. I've read this in many different places where even like in psychology, they recognize that whatever age you were when certain traumas happen, you struggle to emotionally progress past that point. And that once your body or once your mind feels that you're in even a remotely similar situation, like seeing the thunderstorm for an example, it just triggers you right back into that space. But because your subconscious mind is like, okay, we know what happens when we're here. We know what happens, and this is going to be a trauma. Like I said, even if it's not, it's just a perception of a trauma. We instantly go back and we start to react from that place of the programming, not from who we are and where we are right now. And that's where emotional immaturity comes from. And that's why you will notice if you have been someone who's triggered someone else, you will notice that they may act like they may be in a full grown body, but they may act like they're, 8 or 10 or 12 years old, because they might act like a child because that programming is very much set to when the trauma first happened, not when they were triggered by the trauma. And this is something that's very interesting to start working through it and to recognize, like with your own traumas, of where are you like less emotionally mature. And this isn't something that you should use. I mean, nothing that I share should ever be used against you to beat yourself up or to feel you make you feel less than. Because all I want to do is to build awareness that, hey, you know what? There is a way that you can change that. You can change that subconscious programming and start to look at, say, thunderstorms not as a trigger anymore, but just for part of the beauty of nature. That comes with doing the inner work, that comes with releasing that proverbial that rock that I was showing you when you are talking about earlier, when I explained about having that rock. If that rock can be set there based on a trauma, then the trauma can be healed. That rock is essentially released. Therefore, you're no longer programmed to to respond or react from that place. You now are able to respond as a full grown adult, not someone who was triggered as a child. And if you're sitting there watching this video, like, oh, I don't do that, I guarantee you especially do that. It's always the ones that deny it. And there's been times, like in my own healing, where I was like, it was hard. It was hard to recognize of like, okay, you know what? Yeah, when I see myself in this kind of a situation, this is how I respond to it or react to it. Because when we are triggered by something, it's always a reaction. There's a huge difference between responding and reacting is the cause of self-preservation. Is ultimately what it is. We're trying to make sure that we're not re-traumatized. Essentially, that's at the sub like the at the very base of everything that's going on. That's exactly what's going on. It's self-preservation. But when and you so you become reactive. But in healing, you can release that programming, release what triggers you, release all aspects of it, and then you actually are able to come from a place of responding rather than reacting. And essentially, that's what healing is all about. And that's why you do it, is to come from a place of emotional immaturity, of being triggered back to the emotions of when you were first traumatized, rather, and being able to look at that and release that, and then being able to respond from a place of being mentally and emotionally who and where you are now in your life. Like I said, this is something that is not, it's not always easy to look at, because honestly the best way to look at if how your own emotional maturity is how you respond in those times where most likely, unless you've done the healing work, you're probably going to like not think very highly of yourself at the end of it. If you get through an altercation with someone, or if you know that you were triggered by something and you lashed out at someone else, it's going to make you feel really, really crappy about yourself. That's usually when you know that emotional immaturity is an issue there, because we know that we're acting like a child on some level. We know it, and to have to be able to look at that and to face that is obviously, like I said, it's not easy. There is a lot to healing that is not easy, but is definitely necessary. Because I mean, from my perspective, I would rather have the ability to react to someone, or sorry, respond to someone, because in that moment I feel like I'm fully present rather than being reactive. Because if I'm reactive, I'm just like, I'm losing my cool. I'm completely off the cuff, and a lot of times I don't even remember what I say or do. Like, so. I mean, I remember the gist of it, but I wouldn't remember for word, just because I'd be so irate. That's what triggering being triggered looks like. And to me, as hard as the healing part of it is, finding yourself in that emotional immaturity stage is definitely a lot harder to have to live with. Like I said, because it makes you feel worse about yourself. All right, if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to comment on this video, or you can reach out to me. And I will see you back here next time. Thanks so much for joining me. Until then, take care. Bye for now.